You are not what the world sees. The image you present to others, no matter how refined, friendly, or coherent it may seem, is just a fraction of what resides within you. And as uncomfortable as it may be to admit, it is precisely this image that begins to define how you see yourself. Carl Gustav Jung called this construction persona, the mask you wear to function in the world. It is not a lie. It is a necessary psychic creation, a symbolic armor shaped by the demands of social life. The persona protects, organizes, allows for relationships and roles. But it is, above all, a boundary, a layer between what you show and what you hide, between what you have learned to be and what you truly are. The problem arises when this mask becomes the only possible face, when the individual forgets that they are acting and begins to believe that the character is their real self. You work, talk, interact, publish, respond, and gradually, your being starts to mold itself to the expectations of others. Until one day, without realizing it, you begin to feel an emptiness, an unease that has no name, a feeling of being present in the world, but absent from yourself. The persona is the first archetype of our journey, and like any good guardian, it demands something before allowing the crossing: awareness. It protects, but it also limits. The issue is not to destroy it, but to recognize it for what it is: a bridge, not a destination. You need it to navigate the world, but you need to go beyond it, to inhabit your own soul. Think carefully. How many times do you say what others expect to hear? How many times do you smile out of obligation? How many times do you act out of fear of rejection or desire for acceptance? This is not weakness. It is the game of the persona, a game we all play, but few have the courage to interrupt. Jung warned, the more a person identifies with their persona, the further they distance themselves from their self. The persona is a contract with the collective, but the self is the call of the individual, of wholeness, of what pulses within you, even when everything is silent. That is why this video is not about masks, but about crossings. You will be introduced to 7 fundamental archetypes, living images that arise in dreams, myths, symbols, and more importantly, in your own life experience. These figures are not outside of you. They live within your psyche, waiting for the right moment to emerge, not as threats, but as guides. And the first step is this: to realize that there is a mask, and that behind it, there is someone waiting to be seen. The journey to discover the true self does not begin with grand answers. It begins with the simple, yet radical, willingness to look at oneself, without masks, without filters, without fear. So, if you have made it this far, it is because something in you has already begun to move. The question now is, are you ready to cross the door? Inside you, there is someone you have tried to silence, hide, control, or even eliminate. But they have never left. They remain there, waiting, observing, manifesting in the most unexpected moments. This someone is your shadow. The shadow, in Carl Jung's thinking, is not an internal enemy. It is a legitimate part of the psyche. An archetypal figure that carries everything you have, excluded from your conscious identity. Fears, impulses, repressed desires, but also forgotten gifts, cursed truths, dormant strengths. Everything you cannot accept as yours, everything you consider incompatible with the persona you have built, is pushed into this dark region of the soul. Have you noticed how certain reactions escape your control? How sometimes you explode with anger over something seemingly trivial, feel jealousy without wanting to, or sabotage moments of achievement and peace? These are traits of the shadow trying to emerge. It does not manifest only as destruction. It also appears in the creative impulses you fear, in the sexuality you repress, in the courage you do not believe you possess. Symbolically, the shadow is the exiled brother, the guardian of the gate to the underworld, the wolf at the edge of the village. In dreams, it may appear as a threatening figure, a stranger, a monster, a rival. But in truth, it wants to communicate. It wants to be recognized, not fought. Because only by facing it head-on can you become whole. Jung said, "Those who look outside dream. Those who look inside awaken." The shadow is the beginning of that awakening. Not because it is comfortable, but because it is inevitable. True psychological maturity does not come from accumulating knowledge, but from having the courage to face what lies behind the facade and bringing light to the darkness. However, caution is needed. Facing the shadow does not mean yielding to it. It also does not mean controlling it by willpower. It means recognizing it, dialoguing with it, understanding what it wants to express. Often, what the shadow desires is to reclaim what has been left behind: spontaneity, truth, instinct, creativity. Integrating the shadow is freeing yourself from the superficial moral game of good and evil, right and wrong, and entering the deep territory of being human. And why does this matter? Because as long as the shadow remains in the dark, it will control your life. Silently, it shapes your relationships, your choices, your worldview. But when you bring it to light, with awareness, with compassion, with firmness, it ceases to be a saboteur and becomes an ally. And thus, by traversing this inner territory and making peace with what has been forgotten, a new psychic landscape opens up. You begin to realize that within you exist opposing forces, and that they need to dialogue, not wage war. And it is precisely at this point in the journey that two fundamental figures emerge. Two internal images that profoundly shape your way of loving, creating, thinking, and relating: anima and animus. If this content is making sense to you, click the subscribe button and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for your support. Inside every human being, there resides a mysterious presence. A figure that does not belong to the external world, yet cannot be ignored. Jung referred to it as anima when it appears in the male psyche, and as animus when it manifests in the female psyche. These archetypes are not merely representations of the opposite sex. They are bridges. Bridges between the conscious and the unconscious, between the ego and the self. They are vivid images that act as mediators of the soul. The anima is the personification of the inner feminine in man. She is not simply the sensitivity or emotion of the modern man. She symbolizes his ability to connect with the unconscious, with feelings, with intuitive values. She appears in dreams as mysterious, seductive, wise, or dangerous feminine figures. She can be the muse that inspires, the inner mother that nurtures, the witch that destabilizes, or the goddess that reveals hidden paths. Each facet of the anima is a stage towards psychic wholeness. The animus, on the other hand, is the archetype of the inner masculine in women. It symbolizes reason, direction, the structure of thought, and the energy that drives action. When unconscious, the animus can manifest as a critical internal voice, judgmental and rigid. But when integrated, it becomes a reliable guide, a force of authentic expression, a creative spirit that helps a woman assert her individuality. In dreams, the animus may appear as multiple masculine figures: the warrior, the teacher, the lover, the wise man. These images are not static. They evolve as our own psychological development progresses. Denying or repressing them creates imbalance, as it distances us from the completeness that the psyche seeks. A man who rejects his anima tends to project it onto the women he encounters, and lives in relationships filled with idealizations, deficiencies, or repulsions. A woman who rejects her animus often struggles to assert her voice or becomes dominated by a hostile rationality disconnected from her inner truth. But when these figures are recognized as living parts of our inner world, something changes profoundly. The relationship with the other ceases to be a territory of projection and becomes a field of discovery. Love stops being an escape from loneliness and becomes a true encounter between wholes. Creation, inspiration, structured thought, and emotional surrender. All of this begins to flow with more harmony. Integrating anima and animus is, therefore, to accept that we are made of polarities, that the feminine and the masculine are not merely social or biological roles, but cosmic principles that intertwine in the soul of each of us. It is to allow intuition to walk alongside reason, for sensitivity to complement strength, for surrender to coexist with assertion. Jung saw this internal meeting as a crucial milestone in the process of individuation. Because when we manage to dialogue with these archetypal figures, without fear, without submission, without projections, we begin to see the other with greater clarity. We start to inhabit our own psyche with more wholeness. But like any symbolic process, this reconnection with the soul requires traversing the unknown. It is not merely a movement of acceptance, but also of transformation. And it is at this point in the journey that one of humanity's oldest and most universal figures reveals itself: the hero.